Have you ever felt as if the way your mind works doesn't quite match what the world expects of you? Perhaps you've been told to be more logical when you instinctively rely on emotion. Or maybe you were accused of being too sensitive because you saw meaning where others dismissed only noise. Carl Jung once suggested that people don't have ideas, ideas have people. And in a quiet way, that sentence points toward a startling truth. Whether we realize it or not, each of us walks through life carrying a particular lens through which the world is interpreted. From the moment we are born, we begin to inherit expectations. Parents, teachers, even well-meaning friends press us toward behaviors that match their vision of what is normal. A curious child who spends long hours imagining might be called a dreamer, scolded for not paying attention. A solemn, structured child might be suspected of being rigid or unimaginative. A boy who cries at sorrow on the playground might be told to toughen up. A girl who dismantles toys to find out how they work may be told she is strange. These gentle nudges, repeated hundreds of times in childhood, press us toward roles we may not have chosen for ourselves. But here lies the dilemma Jung uncovered. What if those roles were never truly ours to begin with? What if we've been playing a character rather than inhabiting our real selves? Jung believed that most people, most of the time, never question the lens through which they view the world. They consider their style of thinking, their habits of reacting, to be simply who they are. But beneath this lies something extraordinary. Our personality is not as solid nor as obvious as we imagine. The way we make sense of reality is structured around hidden tendencies, and if we can recognize them, we can reclaim power over our lives. The Swiss psychiatrist spoke of two essential attitudes that form the foundation upon which all else rests: introversion and extroversion. Today, those words have slipped into the language of everyday conversation, where introvert too often means shy and extrovert means loud. But Jung's meaning was far more profound. An introverted person, in Jung's psychology, is not necessarily timid or socially withdrawn. Rather, their life energy flows inward. Their thoughts coil around themselves, finding clarity in solitude and in reflection. Such a person may speak little, but it is because they are listening inward. By contrast, an extrovert does not automatically mean a social butterfly basking in constant chatter. Instead, it represents a mind directed outward. The extrovert feels alive in engagement, in the friction of reality, in conversation, in the marketplace. Energy rushes into them when they meet the external world. Neither orientation is better or worse. They are simply the two directions consciousness can face, within or without. Yet these attitudes are only the gateway. Beyond them, Jung described four fundamental ways that the human psyche processes reality. Imagine them as four great rivers feeding the sea of consciousness. Thinking, the deliberate weighing of logic, the drive for structure, the puzzle solver seeking truth in consistency. Feeling, not mere sentimental emotion, but an evaluative compass guided by values, by a vision of harmony, by what is morally right. Sensation, the direct contact with the five senses, the sharp presence with what is tangible and immediate. Intuition, the mysterious eye that sees behind the curtain, linking fragments to perceive patterns and future possibilities unseen by others. Each of us, Jung proposed, carries all four of these rivers within, but one will dominate. One function carries our boat most of the time, shaping what catches our attention, directing what feels meaningful. A thinker, guided by their compass of logic, may wake each morning already structuring their day as if aligning pieces on a chessboard. A feeler, moved by relationships and convictions, might enter the same day attentive to whether the people around them are at peace with one another. A sensor moves through the present like a scout, grounded in the practical facts of what is, and an intuitive drifts toward what could be, seeing connections that others miss entirely. The temptation is to identify ourselves quickly. Yes, I am the thinker. Yes, I am the dreamer. But Jung offered a warning. the personality we present may not truly be our own. Many of us have spent years, perhaps decades, suppressing our natural function to satisfy expectations. A logical child ordered to be more emotional, a deeply sensitive youth commanded to be rational, the intuitive dismissed as impractical, the detail-conscious censor mocked as narrow-minded. In bending ourselves toward the world's demands, we risk losing the part of us most authentic. This is why decisions sometimes feel forced, why life can grow strangely exhausting. Imagine wearing spectacles ground for someone else's eyes. The colors blur, the world strains. Such is the life lived outside of one's true function. But Jung's insight did not end at this observation. He believed that within the unconscious, beneath the function we trust, and beneath the role we perform, lurks the neglected half of our psyche. It is not merely about discovering the function that dominates us. It is about recognizing what we have been ignoring our entire lives. Because the real transformation does not come only from identifying strengths. It comes from confronting the absence, the silent shadow of what we abandoned. Think on this. Which of the four functions speaks to you most easily? Logic, feeling, sensation, intuition. And now ask the more difficult question. Which have you pushed aside out of fear, shame, or habit? For it is there, in what has been silenced, that Jung believed our growth waits. Before one can journey deeper into the 8 distinct personality patterns Jung mapped out, before we can name which function dominates our everyday life, this paradox must first be faced. We have already been shaped by family, by culture, by history, into someone who might be only a partial version of our true self. And unless we turn our attention inward, unless we are willing to challenge what feels familiar and safe, we will wander as actors in a story written by the expectations of others. Once Jung had established the 4 great ways of seeing the world, thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition, he turned to a more intricate discovery. Each of these could flow outward into the external world, extroverted, or inward into the private chambers of the self, introverted. The union of those 2 attitudes with the 4 functions created not 4, but 8 distinct types of mind, 8 unique languages by which human beings interpret existence. Consider first the extroverted thinker. Their psyche is drawn outward, but filtered through order and logic. To them, the world is a puzzle best solved by arranging facts into working systems. They thrive where efficiency reigns, an army officer designing strategy, an engineer building a bridge, a CEO keeping the gears of commerce turning. Like an architect, they measure, calculate, and demand results. Their strength is astonishing clarity, but at a cost. Such individuals may dismiss the human cost of their decisions, perceiving feelings as distractions rather than sources of wisdom. They can build great systems, but sometimes those systems leave people gasping at their edges. By contrast, the introverted thinker points his compass inward. Instead of organizing the outer world, they dissect reality within their private laboratory. Imagine a philosopher pacing alone at night, absorbed in questions so abstract their neighbors cannot fathom them. For them, every assumption must be tested, every principle purified. They are map makers of invisible territory. Their challenge is translation. They may find profound truths, yet lack the bridge to bring them into practical life. Too often the insight remains trapped, a gem shining deep underwater, unseen. The extroverted feeler, on the other hand, moves through the world guided not by efficiency, but by harmony. They sense the emotional climate of a room as if by instinct, adjusting tone, gesture, and word to weave connections among people. To them, no fact is as urgent as whether those around them feel safe and understood. Their danger, however, is self-erasure. By molding themselves to meet the needs of others, they may forget entirely what they truly desire. They can be beloved by communities, yet suffer silently when the mirror returns no reflection of their own soul. Opposite them stands the introverted feeler, who withdraws not from people, but from society's verdict. Their morality burns inward, unshaken by convention. They are the rebels who refuse to betray their deepest sense of rightness, even if all the world stands against them. Many of history's poets, prophets, and reformers carried this voice, the voice that creates art not to please, but to reveal a truth. Yet their depth can isolate them. Articulating what they feel is often impossible, for their convictions dwell in the marrow, not in words. A culture may see them as eccentric, or ignore them entirely, until decades later when their defiance shapes a new movement. Now consider those governed by extroverted sensation. These are people of the moment, fully awake to the flavors, colors, textures of the now. They do not dream about life. They taste it, touch it, wrestle with it. The thrill of a motorbike ride, the crisp snap of an apple freshly picked, the rush of a market bazaar, these moments are what fuel them. Such people often excel in fast-paced, immediate environments. Athletes, performers, explorers. Yet such intensity carries a shadow. In chasing experience to experience, they may find the future slipping unplanned, their lives a series of bright sparks with no woven thread. Their kin, the introverted sensor, lives not in the vivid present, but in the echoing corridor of memory. Theirs is a world made safe by precedent and tradition. They act with caution because history has taught them what endures and what falls away. They can recall details others miss, the sound of a voice from decades ago, the precise lines of a childhood scene. They preserve cultures, protect traditions, guard the wisdom of the past. And yet, they may resist change so fiercely that renewal becomes impossible, clutching at the known even as the world reshapes around them. Then there is the extroverted intuitive, a mind that rarely sits still. Where others see what is, they see only what could be. Their energy races from idea to idea, connecting disparate fields. A scientist glimpsing innovation between biology and mathematics, an entrepreneur chasing a dozen startups, a storyteller weaving new myths. They hunger for what lies over the next horizon, restless in their curiosity. But such brilliance can scatter itself. Projects lie unfinished. Visions remain castles in the sky, unless they learn to anchor their imagination to the ground. And finally, the introverted intuitive, a type whose insights arrive as if whispered from another dimension. They move through life interpreting the pattern beneath the surface, sensing where the current is carrying us long before others recognize it. Their ideas may feel prophetic, though they themselves struggle to explain how they know. Their downfall is opacity. Their vision may be correct, but if they cannot translate it, they stand alone, misunderstood, like enigmatic figures speaking a language no one else has yet been taught. Jung's point was not that we are one of these types exclusively. Rather, that one of them serves as our dominant function, the primary voice of our inner conductor. But to remain human, our psyche demands more than a single instrument. Around this dominant stands an auxiliary function, a supporting partner that helps balance our ways of being. A strict thinker aided by feeling may remember compassion when logic alone would wound. An intuitive tempered by sensation may bring their dream down to earth and plant it in soil. Beneath even this, Jung described the tertiary function, often immature, surfacing occasionally like flashes of unfamiliar talent. And finally, in the deepest shadows of the psyche, the inferior function, our frailest and most neglected mode of experience. This is the part of us we struggle with most. The thinker bewildered by strong emotions, the feeler terrified of cold rationality, the realist lost in abstraction, the dreamer paralyzed by mundane details. In everyday life, we call these blind spots. Jung named them invitations to growth. For though the inferior function often rises first in moments of crisis or fatigue, it also carries the possibility of wholeness. To wrestle with it is painful. To integrate it is transformational. Imagine a brilliant statesman guided by extroverted thinking, designing flawless systems to govern millions. But when tragedy strikes, and human grief pulses raw before him, he is undone, until he learns to honor the very feelings he once dismissed. Or imagine a visionary artist, full of intuition, whose work explodes with possibility, but who starves in neglect until learning the patient reliability of small daily rituals that senses practice instinctively. This, said Jung, is the magnificent contradiction of personality. What supports us most also blinds us most, and what frightens us most may complete us. Much of who we are lies beneath the surface, hidden from our conscious gaze. We imagine that our choices spring purely from will, that our character is transparent to ourselves. Carl Jung disagreed. He argued that behind every thought, behind every impulse or fear, a deeper realm, the unconscious, is constantly shaping us in ways we cannot see. It is in this underground chamber that Jung identified one of his most haunting ideas, the shadow. The shadow is composed of all those parts of ourselves that we have been taught to deny, repress, or disown. A child told to be nice learns to suppress anger. Another shamed for tears learns to bury vulnerability. A student mocked for curiosity grows to distrust their own imagination. These qualities do not vanish. They sink. And from the depths, they tug at our strings. The shadow does not remain silent. It slips out in surges of rage, in patterns of self-sabotage, in sudden dislike for people who mirror exactly what we cannot bear to see in ourselves. We project our shadow onto others because facing it within feels unbearable. The more it is ignored, the more powerful its sway. Yet Jung did not see this darkness as an enemy. To him, it was key to wholeness. The task is not to destroy the shadow, but to turn toward it, to make conscious what was unconscious, to integrate instead of exile. When that happens, qualities once feared, anger, ambition, passion, vulnerability, become sources of strength. To run from the shadow is to remain fragmented. To embrace it is to take the first step toward becoming whole. This journey toward wholeness Jung called individuation. Unlike other psychological theories of his time, which sought to fix traits or correct disorders, individuation was not about repair. It was about realization, to become who you truly are, not the mask society has placed upon you, not the single function you have polished for safety, but the entire being, contradictions and all. Here lies one of the most often misunderstood aspects of Jung's system. Popular culture, particularly through the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, has simplified his vision into neat boxes, 16 labels that make personality sound fixed, static, unchanging. Jung never intended that. He spoke of functions and attitudes not as rigid categories, but as flowing tendencies, patterns of preference that can shift as we grow. Nor did he mean introversion and extroversion as simple matters of shyness or sociability. Instead, they marked where attention turns, whether inward to the subjective world or outward to the external one. In Jung's time, this was a radical reimagining, a way of seeing human variety not as weakness, but as a necessary structure of the psyche. So what then is individuation? It is, in Jung's words, the privilege of a lifetime to become who you truly are. But this privilege does not come cheap. The process demands confrontation with the shadow, courage to integrate the inferior function, humility to admit that the face we show the world is but one dimension of a larger self. It requires learning to hold opposites together, logic and feeling, tradition and innovation, passion and restraint. Cultural traditions across the world echo this idea. In Taoist philosophy, balance arises not by choosing yin over yang, but by holding both. In Greek thought, Socrates urged, "Know thyself," as the beginning of wisdom. Not simply cataloguing strengths, but uncovering contradictions. Even the Stoics, often mistaken for cold rationalists, wrestled with impulses and emotions, insisting that mastery came from integrating reason with human fragility. Jung's individuation stood in this lineage, not a denial of our divided selves, but their reconciliation. What would such reconciliation look like? Picture the thinker who has spent a life of cold clarity, suddenly allowing themselves to cry, and instead of shame, they feel relief. Picture the sensitive feeler who has always feared cold logic, discovering that reason, far from enemy, can become an ally in defending their values. The intuitive dreamer who grounds their visions in daily discipline. The detail-focused sensor who dares to imagine and finds visions sprouting in soil they once guarded too tightly. This integration changes everything: relationships, choices, destinies. A couple at war, one hungering for logic, the other craving empathy, suddenly see not enemies, but complementary strengths. A worker exhausted in a career mismatched to their personality finally recognizes why they felt suffocated and turns toward what suits their natural rhythm. Teams once fractured by different communication styles learn to recognize the intelligence carried by each function, using tension as fuel rather than friction. Jung's theory of types is no vanity exercise, no party trick of labels. It is a tool, a map of the psyche meant to lead us toward freedom. Freedom from blind spots, from projections, from the prison of one-dimensional selfhood. But the path is not easy. Society rewards us for fitting roles, for playing the mask. Culture celebrates extroverted thinkers who bring efficiency, intuitive dreamers who spark innovation, feelers who smooth tensions, sensors who preserve order. Yet the cost of staying only in our mask is high. The cost is fragmentation, exhaustion, the nagging sense of something missing. To individuate is to risk that comfort, to court discomfort in order to awaken, to cease living as a fragment and to begin living as a whole. And so I leave you with the question that Jung himself would have asked. Who are you beneath expectation, beneath conditioning, beneath the roles pressed upon you? You are not only your strengths, you are also your failures, your forgotten gifts, your fears, your longing, your shadow. To bring these together is not to manufacture a new self, but to reveal the one that has always been waiting in silence. Perhaps the journey has already begun. For the very moment you ask the question, the unraveling of illusion has started.